Everybody, get out in the square. The fighters are coming down from the hills. It's Wednesday, 11 July, 2018, and this is the General Welfare Tendency. Avanti!
Greetings, citizenry. I'm Gavin McFoy Dunn, and this is the General Welfare Tendency on YouTube. Coming with you with a little bit of disappointment with myself, about myself, which is to say this show is a placeholder. Technical difficulties have made it impossible for us to stream today, so I'm simply preparing this little squib hinting at some things that will be discussed later, a particular bugaboo of mine own, that will lead to a further discussion one of these days. But right now, I just ask your indulgence and promise you that there will be better, longer, more complicated, and replete with moving parts shows of levels of complexity that I won't even be able to believe, but it would necessitate the computer with all the software on it actually being here at the moment and other such things. So here you go. Anyway, what I'd like to talk to you about today, and just very briefly, I'll come back to this later, is political imagery in the early 21st century. You've been seeing it for years, sans serif fonts with pundits discussing their manliness, arguments about whether the serif is the typographic equivalent of soy. It takes a lot of forms, but the argument I have is that everybody is completely inured to it. They can't see it anymore. It's almost impossible for people to register any sort of movement occurring in them as a result of the graphics they see, because they might as well be for soap or male enhancement products or hi Alex or whatever. But I just want to suggest that in a general campaign to alter people's minds about the possibilities and even the definitions of politics, it might help to use some new pictures. And this is sort of where the discussion dovetails with the general welfare logo, which you see there. I'm gonna just be an engineer here and run in on this close enough for you to see it. The wonderful digital world. You've seen it earlier, of course. I'll cut in a proper one here later. But the emblem itself is derived from the work of a man of very great interest to me. He was a teacher of Rubens. His name was Otto van Veen, and this emblem comes from his very, very intriguing book, Emblematibus Symbola of 1624. He was a teacher of Rubens. I'm not sure for all of Veen's humanistic accomplishments that he established in Rubens the sagacity that made it possible for him to function as an international diplomat in the run-up and early years of the 30 Years' War. I think he was still around at that point. Yes, surely. In any case, this shows how my grasp of chronology is. But the whole of emblem literature is fascinating, and given the extent that it had a very substantial grasp on the intellectual structures of the 17th century, which was a period of huge political ferment. We Anglo-Saxons, mostly in history classes, get a lot of what went on in the English Civil War, especially, glossed over. The fact that the place was lousy with commies is very little discussed, although the name of the Diggers may be familiar to even the least historically minded of you. The old hippie commune, wavy gravy and all that. That was taken from Gerard Winstanley's sphere of operation during the middle of the 17th century in England. Effort to restore the commons from the enclosures of a century earlier. Property in common per God's law, as far as Winstanley and Walwyn and a raft of other English thinkers would have it. But a lot of this ferment spilled out almost as subconscious imagery breaking to the surface. In the emblem on the general welfare flag, you see two hands, which are intentionally colored soft pumpkin in my colorized version, clasping. They emerge from a cloud. It's a convention in emblem representations that all manner of operations involve hands and other limbs emerging from clouds, which doesn't necessarily indicate some divine or heavenly agency, but sometimes it does. You have to learn how to read the things. Van Veen operated in the regime of emblems as hieroglyphs. Athanasius Kircher, the Jesuit polymath, had devoted some time to interpreting Egyptian hieroglyphs. Everyone has been at it since antiquity. All the texts were lost, along with Claudius's Etruscan lexicon, etc., etc., all gone. Nobody had the slightest idea what it meant. The Rosetta Stone was, that's in 1600, 2 centuries and change away from being discovered. And many gallons of ink were spilled by Kircher alone, trying to sort out what they meant. And an elaborate symbolic repertory was developed, which bore no resemblance whatever to how the hieroglyphs actually worked, but it became very important in the learned and recondite expressions of the abstract that held sway in Europe in certainly the first half of the 17th century. They would assemble images in various ways, something akin to the Laputa chapter in Swift's Gulliver's Travels. Philosophers trying to unpack language with objects or symbols that were more concrete. And this was also tied to the mnemonic tradition and the memory palaces, furnishing the palace in your mind with odds and ends that would remind you of this or that complex of ideas. Vane did something of the sort, along with a lot of other people, but his is more comprehensive than a lot of them, because symbols recur in a systematic, not fully systematic, but reasonably organized way throughout. And this emblem is two hands clasped above a cabbage. Now, apart from the fact that it has the handy effect of making our patriotic colored emblem have a little green in it, it's also brassica, cibum pauperum, cabbage, the food of the poor. It's an analysis of collective provision, and that's one of the reasons I selected it. Also a fondness for the homely cabbage, which Vane had too. In one of his reductions of Horace, he kept adducing the cabbage as an analytic of the blot of the poor, a symbolic form of it. So I selected this pretty consciously with the view to trying to move away from the visual vocabulary that has become so ossified that people simply can't see it, and to go more in this direction. Now, we have other emblems to look at. Here's one also by Vane from the same work, Emblematibus Symbola of 1624. You see, buffeted by winds on either side, a plumb bob, a level, and the motto, Aequitas exercitia malis. You can kind of get close enough with cognates on it. It's equity exercises malice, or incites, induces. It's double-edged, as a lot of this is. There's a lot of aristocratic thinking on both imperial and German princely sides in this, and Protestant houses. The poor are regarded as worthy of compassion and also incredibly untrustworthy. So the malice excited can be either from those who do not wish to see equity, or those who do not feel that equity has been exercised adequately in their case. There you have it. It's a striking image, nonetheless, and it's just something to think about. Try to imagine a sign about 3 meters tall within a crowd of 1 million people. Lots of them. I think about it a lot. Anyway, our next image is from the Viridarium, Hieroglyphico Morale of 1690 by one Heinrich Ovius, who was a Reformation firebrand preacher. Did some prophetic works that I just discovered in the course of doing a little backup research for this. Crazy stuff, wildly anti-papist. This really doesn't require any translation. Justitia I can't even say it in Latin because I stayed up all night trying to just get this little bit of an intro put together. Distributiva, I presume. I use classical pronunciation, you gotta forgive me. Distributive justice. This was a matter of some concern in the 17th century, again, among both Catholic and Protestant theologians and political thinkers. Understood at the time as now as that which is owed by a community to its members. the notions were different to some extent, particularly of what constituted community. There was some concern among Catholic partisans that the charitable activities of the Reformed churches and associated organizations would in themselves be enough of an inducement to lose them a good many of the faithful if they weren't careful, that sort of thing. It was political as much as anything else. But I would like to call your attention to the just truly strange imagery. Again, imagine this 3 meters tall, waving above a crowd. Now, mind you, this particular work is entirely in Latin, and Baroque Latin at that, so my ability to parse it is limited, and I am sure there are things I have read into it that are not there, in this case as in all of them. But serpents, which of necessity probably hark back to those raised above the people by Moses, twine around a hand coming from heaven, pointing straight down through yet another plumb bob, down to the scales of justice, and 3 faces appear on a triangle, with the serpent emerging from the mouths of the 2 above. The 3rd face faces the earth. Honest to God, I don't understand all of it. But look at that. That would wake somebody up. That would make them think about the phrase distributive justice a little more vigorously than they might if they just saw some red, white, and blue sans serif thing with candidate's name on it and something like better stuff. Just a notion. That's from 1619, did I say? Yes, amazing thing. Here is a flying block of marble with the motto Natura repugnat, or nature abhors. I think that's right. If anyone has better translations for any of this Latin than what I've given, by all means, please correct me. But this is from the Emblemas Morales of one Covarrubias Orozco, who was famous enough in the European context to actually be mentioned by Sir Thomas Browne. And I want to say urn burial, but I'm not sure. Be that as it may. This is from 1610, and it's a very long book, written in what 3 centuries, or 3 groups of 100. This was a pretty common organizational technique for works in emblem literature of this period. I just really have this in there because I just like the idea of the flying block of marble as a representation of things unnatural. Blocks of marble aren't supposed to fly, says the Baroque consciousness who could not conceive giant blocks of sandstone being hauled away from basically what was soon to be the bed of a giant dam's supply reservoir. So there you go with that. And last but certainly not least, do please let me move on to, is this the last one? I can't remember. Oh, how did that one get in there? Oops. Respublica Liberata. There you see two daggers and a liberty cap, and as an inscription abbreviated, Ides of March, from a 1621 edition of Andrea Alciato, sorry. My pronunciation is not good today. Excuse me, I'm asleep. Alciato did his work in the middle of the 16th century, and roughly, and pretty much defined the entire field of emblem literature as it would be practiced until its demise in the early 18th century. His Emblemata, in some senses, is the book that started it all, and, well, you know, you see it. So, GoFundMe.com/general-welfare/YouTube project. That's money. I could use some for basically a computer that doesn't come and go sometimes, which would have made this a lot better show. Anyway, I'm just concerned to get people out of their ruts, to get them to think more about the history of social thought, shall we say. I think it's important to try to imagine that the current atomism, it's not graven in the stars. It's not something that's always been here, and it won't always be here. You can liberate yourself from it, but other paths of thinking will have to be pursued almost as an exercise. Anyway, that's just that. I'll probably do this again sometime soon. I really just wanted to put together a little something and stick it on and be able to say, well, here's this Wednesday's whatever it is. Next week, the 18th, grid willing and the creek don't rise, we will have a normal show of its actual length with guests and Skype call-ins and punch and pie. That's about all I got. Have a good week. Thanks. And we're out.